This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
And a very good afternoon, everybody. Yes, across Bloomberg platforms, this is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily. On this Monday, October 27th, we are getting ready to wrap up the month of October.
I thought you were getting your Halloween costume ready.
This is my costume.
Friday.
Did you not see?
Okay.
I don't even know what that means.
Friday, Carol. We have until Friday.
Okay.
But that's the end of the first month of the final quarter of the year.
I got to say, by the time we get to Friday, we're going to be like, oh my God, because there is so much going on. We got earnings from the 5 of the Mag 7 this week. We've got NVIDIA's big shindig getting underway actually today in D.C., Tim.
Yeah, Ed Ludlow is going to be there. He's there already. Also, outside of the U.S., President Trump and President Xi are meeting face-to-face. Oh, the government shutdown is continuing. It's now the second longest in U.S. history. And then, Carol, Jay Powell is putting pen to paper this week, along with other members of the Federal Reserve Board, because there's a Fed decision on Wednesday. There is. It's only 2 more meetings, one this week and then one in December. So there's a lot going on. Hey, this next 60 minutes, we're going to talk about all of it. VanEck is with us, Chief Executive Officer of VanEck. So we're going to kind of tie it all together. What does it mean for investors? Michael McKee from Bloomberg News, International Economic Policy Correspondent. He's going to talk a little bit about Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's Fed finalist and maybe a little preview, too, what we hear from the Fed chair on Wednesday. I so love the swimsuit competition. Can I just put that out there? I was not aware of this. There is no swimsuit competition. It's all about what they will do as head of the U.S. Central Bank. Sorry, it's a little wacky Monday. Hey, also, diplomatic wins ahead of President Trump and President Xi's meeting on Thursday. So U.S.-China trade. You want to know why markets are up, equity markets? This is a good reason why. Also, something that just feels super relevant in our world right now. Jimmy Wales, he's the founder of Wikipedia. He's got a new book out. He's going to be stopping by the studio. We're going to talk about one thing, and that is trust. So relevant today. Hey, let's get a check on the trading day on this Monday. So glad to have back with us. He is back, Charlie Pellet.
And delighted to be here. Here's what's going on. We got stocks pushing higher. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all looking at solid gains right now. Very close to session highs on this back-to-work Monday. Lots of deals going on, lots of concerns about earnings, what that may bring later in the week. And, of course, all eyes on the Federal Reserve. The big story today, though, trade. Wall Street's hopes that the U.S. and China are nearing a trade deal, lifting the riskier corners of the market. Right now, we got the S&P 500 index up 70, 68, 61 where we stand on the S&P. That is advanced right now of just about 1%. The Dow up 215, up by 0.5%. NASDAQ up 1.7%. And the Russell 2000 index of small cap shares lagging but higher, up 0.3%. Tech stocks rallying, at least as measured by our Mag 7 index. 5 out of 7 do report this week. That index up now by 2.7%. 10-year 3.99%, with the 2-year currently yielding 3.50%. Gold is tumbling 2.6%. 4,006 was trading below 4,000 earlier today. West Texas Intermediate crude lower little change, down 0.1%. WTI 61.44 a barrel. Qualcomm shares are surging, kicking off the biggest stock rally for the stock since 2019 after unveiling chips and computers for the lucrative AI data center market, aiming to challenge NVIDIA in the fastest growing part of the industry. Qualcomm up now by 12.7% and NVIDIA up by 2.5%. Recapping U.S. stocks trading at a record, S&P 500 index right now up by 1%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, welcome back once again. Charlie Pellet with a Bloomberg Business News Flash. Well, folks, the year is winding down. We've got only 2 Fed meetings and decisions left. The next one, of course, coming in just 2 days from now. We're talking about Wednesday. Ahead of that, one of our most read stories on the Bloomberg on this Monday is about U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who confirmed the names of 5 finalists to succeed Fed Chair Jay Powell, with the president saying he expected to make his decision by year-end. So let's get into it with Bloomberg TV and Radio International Economics and Policy Correspondent Michael McKee. He's here in studio, who, interestingly enough, makes me wonder if this story is that important when he said, you know what you guys really want to talk about? We've got a storm bearing down on us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have
Well,
not on us, but
not on us. Correct.
You don't want to be in Jamaica. The numbers are really bad for Hurricane Melissa. If you know anything about hurricanes, it's Category 5, 175 mile an hour winds, barometric pressure 906 millibars, which would put it like in the top 10 strongest of all time at this point.
All right. Well, something we're certainly watching. I know you're also watching, though, as we said, one of the most read stories about Secretary Bessent and the finalists for the Fed chair. Does this mean this is the list?
Numbers haven't changed, unlike the hurricane. The 5 names had been leaked before, and so this is something that the markets have been absorbing for a couple of weeks. So I don't think it's going to have a whole lot of impact on people's thinking at the moment until we get much closer. Bessent said he's going to hold another round of interviews, and that may lead to some further leaks about who he likes or doesn't like. And he suggested that after Thanksgiving, he would send a couple of names to the president to choose from. There's a lot of thought that the president already knows who he wants. He's just not telling us. So doesn't look like it'll take too long for him to settle on someone. And the president said on Air Force One on his way to Asia that he expected to make a decision in December. So of the 5, the 2 Kevins and Chris Waller, McKee Bowman, and Rick Reeder, one of those is likely the next either the most powerful person in the world or the second most powerful person in the world, depending on who you're talking to.
Mike, a lot to ask when it comes to these individuals and these names, all familiar to us and to the Bloomberg audience, of course. But in terms of policy, are there big policy differences between them and the way they think about the role of the Federal Reserve?
There's probably less division among them in terms of whether they fight inflation hard. Most of them are hawkish. The biggest difference is in other ways that the Fed operates. There's a couple of them, including Kevin Warsh and McKee Bowman, who've suggested we get rid of the system that they use now, which is called the floor system. Go back to the corridor system, which is where the Fed intervenes on a daily basis to move the benchmark rate around, like we used to have in until basically 2000 or early 2000s during the financial crisis, when they changed to this new system, which is what most of the world uses. But there are people who would like to make that change, which would be a massive change on Wall Street because the whole infrastructure has grown up around it. And I can see a lot of people on repo desks going, over my dead body, you'll change it. But that, and then there's disagreements among how broad the Fed's powers should be in terms of lending to financial institutions and in terms of doing things like QE going forward.
You know, what's interesting is Fed decisions obviously influenced a lot by the Fed chair, no doubt about it. We've talked with you before about the voices that really count at the U.S. Central Bank. Having said that, it is a group. So I don't know, are we silly to think, okay, there will be still discussions around the table and still a lot of Fed governors that have been there for years?
Oh, sure. That's exactly what you'll get, at least for a number of years while most of the current cast is on board at the Fed. You will maybe get somebody who wants to cut rates more quickly, but they'll get pushback from people. And a lot of this just depends on the diplomatic skills of the chair. The whole thing with the chair is that they talk to everybody, so they have a pretty good idea where everybody sits as they go into the room. And the theory is you try to pull people towards the most acceptable decision and get as much consensus as you can. There's always going to be sometimes some dissents, but try to get as many people on board as you can. So sometimes the chair comes in with an absolute vision of what needs to be done, and sometimes they come in with a divided Fed like we have now, and the chair is going to kind of reflect back the plurality or majority view and try to get people into one corner or another.
Does the process typically play out like this? Are the names floated months ahead?
No, this has been very unusual. We've not had anything like it in my memory, which goes back to when Alan Greenspan was selected. And I know that what happened a couple of Fed chair before that. There's never been sort of a beauty contest like this. There were some names leaked early in terms of who would replace Ben Bernanke. Bernanke came from the Bush staff and as CEA chair, and he had already been on the Fed, so people were kind of expecting him. But with Janet Yellen, she was chosen because she was sort of a very obvious candidate for a Democratic president to appoint. But then when it came time to Donald Trump, he decided she was too short, and Jay Powell looked like a central banker. And so he said...
Is that the truth?
That's what the president has said.
Okay.
To help determine his decision. Both of them were qualified. So we don't know for sure who is the handsomest among this group.
And to be fair, he has said he has regretted his decision to pick Jay Powell. But
well, sure.
I'm curious also, Mike, about this idea of a shadow Fed chair, because there was talk about this a few months ago. Is doing this in public right now, does it undermine the power of Jay Powell, or will it if we get a pick or an announcement in the next few months?
Well, it could. It depends on when we get the announcement, in part because they have to go through the confirmation process, and generally anybody who is nominated for a senior job in the administration, in any administration, shuts up as soon as they're nominated, because you don't want to make anybody mad up on Capitol Hill and not get voted for. So they'd be quiet for a while, and I suppose this is in theory for the seat that Stephen Myron holds now, which would be a 14-year seat, which is why they'd want to put the chair in that. And so they'd want by the end of January, if they can, to get somebody confirmed. So after that, though, then, it's going to be up to the personality of the chair, the incoming chair, whether they want to publicly break with the actual chair.
All right, Mike McKee, thank you so much. We know we'll be leaning on Mike big time this week, especially with that Fed decision come Wednesday. Bloomberg TV and radio international economics and policy correspondent Mike McKee. As we mentioned at the top, though, a lot coming at folks. The Fed meeting, you've got 5 of the Mag 7 reporting earnings, U.S.-China trade negotiations, and more. Great to have back with us VanEck. He is Chief Executive Officer of VanEck. It has about $133 billion under management, AUM, and he joins us back here in our Bloomberg studio. Jan, great to have you back with us. There is a lot coming at investors. There is this laundry list. What's most important to you when you think about the investment environment, and what shapes your strategy right now?
Well, I just keying off of this monetary policy discussion, I just have to say that the big piano hanging over our heads to me is the federal budget deficit. And since I saw you last, we actually got some pretty good news for fiscal 25, that as a percent of GDP, the budget deficit had fallen from 6.5% to 5.9%. I've been focusing very much on the year that we just started on October 1st, because I think, that's the big risk, right? The Fed, the federal government has to borrow or pay $1 trillion a year.
Yeah.
And sure, the Fed governor, affects that, but what the markets think matters a lot too. And if we can reduce that pressure by having better finances, that's really good news for the market, I think.
But that's not an argument for having not an independent Fed, right? You still want a Fed that does monetary policy according to inflationary pressures and labor pressures.
Right, but what the wonky economists on Wall Street don't want is to have so much debt that you basically are forcing the Fed to use something like Japan did, yield curve control, or some really extraordinary measures. That would really be unwelcome. So we can talk about the personalities and everything, but right now the direction of movement is good compared to coming into the year where we had a lot of fiscal concerns, and the Fed chair would have had a lot more on his plate.
Jan, when you were on with us last, it was about a month ago, it was just before the government shut down, and we asked you about whether or not a government shutdown actually matters to markets. Well, here we are, a month later, and
it's amazing.
It is amazing. I mean, it's the second longest shutdown in history, entering, it's remarkable to see. You said it didn't matter.
Right.
Do you stand by it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any evidence that it has mattered. I think what's really worrisome, though, is the fact that
But it's a dysfunctional government. You have a whole branch of the government that isn't working.
That they don't care, right? Neither party really cares if something bad is happening, if they feel like the other party can get the blame. And again, I don't mean to only talk about the debt problem, but that's really what we all worry about at the end. Like, will we never solve Social Security? Will we cut Social Security payments in 2033 like we're scheduled to?
Yeah.
I mean, those are the longer term concerns.
When you look at this market environment, the other things that are coming, and these are obviously the ones that we just talked about, are super, super big. But I do think about our focus on, these Mag 7 earnings. We get a big drop this week, and we'll learn once again whether these AI investments are paying off. Last time around, we saw it with Meta and some of the other big hyperscalers that these investments seem to make sense at this point. The AI trade, where are you on that?
It's going to continue. We have a compute shortage that's very visible to the whole world. And what's really interesting, I did some research on this since we last talked, and OpenAI is really emerging as the giant in this area. So they have 800 million monthly active users. The next biggest, Gemini, has 450, but much more interesting. So your average website is now getting basically traffic coming from the AI chats somewhere between, let's call it 1% at the low end and 17% at the high end. Of the traffic that's going to your average website, like the Bloomberg website or the VanEck website.
We're not average, just so you know.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
But go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I can't believe I said that. But of that traffic, OpenAI is generating over 90% of that traffic. They are completely dominating the other Mag 7 companies when it comes to that. Now, on the flip side, they are trying to build out a ton of this compute, and they don't have the money, right? All the other hyperscalers have
not
a lot of revenue.
Not public.
Right, and the revenue is only 40 to 50 billion. So, and they want to spend hundreds of billions on compute. So that's the one thing that I look at as a potential weakness in this AI trade. But otherwise, we've got at least 2 calendar years of demand to deal with.
So you're not seeing ghosts of the late 90s tech crash here?
As I said, the only vulnerability I see isn't this sort of systemic thing. It's one company that's spending a ton of money, and so far they've been able to raise it. Everyone else has got the revenue to cover their spend, right? I mean, they've got the cash flow.
And I'm sure in OpenAI can keep raising money. It seems like there's plenty of demand, or maybe even do. Are you doing ChatGPT right now, Carol?
No. I was actually no.
She did just grab her phone.
I did just grab my phone, which is such a no when you're on air. Lisa Abramowitz, who we all she's incredible on surveillance on the TV side, and she said the Mag 7 stocks have accounted for almost half of the S&P 500's 15% gain this year. Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon and Meta are expected to post a combined $360 billion in capex in their current fiscal years and nearly $420 billion next year. So what I'm just wondering is the market, we've talked about that we feel like in the earnings season we're seeing breadth expand. But again, these companies are still so important, right, to the trade.
Yeah, they're really, I mean, we want to ask ourselves, why do they have such a high percent of the S&P 500? And we have an answer, because they're profit dynamos. Not only is their revenue going up, but their employee bases are flat, if not shrinking. So rising revenue, flat costs, because one of the big beneficiaries, obviously, are software companies.
We have 30 seconds on gold. This is where I want to go.
You are going to go there.
Yeah, is that where you were going to go?
I was going to go Qualcomm.
Okay,
go ahead.
So down 8% from its peak. Further to go?
Yeah, 20% correction in the bull market would be my base case.
That's your call, $3,500?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Still not a bad year, right?
Great year. I think the question is, everyone's impatient. They're already looking at their phones and during interviews. The question is, how long does gold consolidate? Right?
It was because for the goodness of the show.
A whole 12 months of consolidation would bore the market. So we may have one of those situations, but still, we like it long term, for the next decade.
Always fun when you join us. Come back soon again. VanEck, he is, of course, Chief Executive Officer of VanEck, joining us here in studio. Hey, we're going to talk about another market catalyst that has to do with U.S.-China relations. It's a big focal point. That when Bloomberg Businessweek Daily continues.
It's 2:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got stocks pushing higher with the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ in the green, very close to session highs right now. Stocks are gaining as Chinese and American trade negotiators have lined up an array of diplomatic wins for President Trump and China's President Xi Jinping to unveil at a summit this week. Here's where we stand. S&P 500 index is up 70 now, 68.62. That is a gain of 1%. Dow Industrial's up 225. 5, up 0.5%. NASDAQ up 1.7%. The Bloomberg Mag 7 Index up 2.7%, with 5 out of 7 Mag 7 stocks scheduled to report later on this week. 10-year 3.99%, with a 2-year 3.50%. Spot gold at 4,005 was trading below 4,000, down now by 2.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude 61.19 a barrel, down 0.5%. Let's make a deal in the banking industry with Huntington Bank shares buying Cadence Bank for $7.4 billion. Huntington down 3.4%, Cadence up 3.7%. And American Waterworks has agreed to buy Essential Utilities in an all-stock deal valued at about $12 billion. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. Well, Wall Street's hopes that the U.S. and China are nearing a trade deal definitely lifted the riskier corners of the market today. We've got stocks hitting all-time highs amid a rally in the crypto world. And this, too, as the safety bid waned, we saw gold sinking below $4,000. We just heard from VanEck. He expects gold to even go a little bit lower from here.
20% correction down to $3,500 per ounce.
But it's had quite a run this year.
Yes, not just this year.
All right, so let's get more on where we are with U.S.-China relations. What's the mood on the ground? We head to Tokyo and to Bloomberg TV White House correspondent Tyler Kendall. It is 3:23 in the morning. So talk about someone who's just really on the go here. Tyler, so Chinese and U.S. trade negotiators, they've lined up what they call, I guess, what we are calling an array of diplomatic wins for President Trump and President Xi, which they are expected to unveil at a summit later on this week. What are these wins, and is this really, really a sign of progress?
Yeah, hey, Carol. Well, both sides are expressing optimism that there has been progress, both of them hailing what they called constructive talks over the weekend in Malaysia. Now, the general sense here is that we are likely going to see an extension to the trade truce that is currently in place and set to expire on November 10th, because we heard the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent effectively take that threat of an additional 100% tariff off of the table. It seems to be in exchange for Beijing pulling back and delaying its recently unveiled export curbs on critical and rare earth minerals. We know this was a top priority for the Trump administration going into these talks. The Treasury Secretary also said that China would resume its purchases of U.S. soybeans after it has not imported a single U.S. soybean so far this harvest season, though we are still waiting on those specific details on what exactly this is going to entail in terms of how much they're going to import and how quickly they can get that done, and American farmers can start to see some relief. Now, on the U.S.'s side, the Treasury Secretary maintains that the U.S. isn't going to loosen any of its export curbs when it comes to advanced semiconductors, but our own analysts at Bloomberg Economics say that we can likely expect those threatened but not yet imposed restrictions, such as on critical software or cloud computing, to likely be pulled off the table, because Carol and Tim, the main theme that's emerging here is that we're seeing a pullback in the recent escalation, the recent moves for leverage jockeying ahead of this critical meeting between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. But there are still deep conflicts when it comes to the broader question of a broader trade deal. But this is giving some sense that, at least for now, there's a little bit more certainty after a period of stark uncertainty and a market contrast to the recent escalation of the last few weeks, in hopes of getting a broader trade deal down the line.
You know, we talked about a few things, Tyler. I heard from you on soybean purchases by China, which has been really affecting farmers here in the U.S. We talked a little bit about rare earths. I'm curious, though, about fentanyl. And have we heard anything from the U.S. side, or at least from our reports regarding the Chinese side, of what the U.S. hopes to have in terms of curbing the arrival of fentanyl in the U.S.?
Well, this is a really critical point, Tim, because actually both sides have said that there have been progress when it comes to the issue of fentanyl. And I'm watching it really closely because I had just outlined recent escalation in the last few weeks. But this 20% tariff linked to fentanyl has been on the books really since the beginning of this second Trump administration. It was imposed back in February using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, over concerns that China hasn't done enough to curb the precursor chemicals that are used to make fentanyl. Now, we haven't gotten specifics on exactly what they are intending to do that led both sides to express this optimism, but that is potentially opening the door where we could see a lessening of that 20% tariff rate. That would actually be a pretty substantial outcome if that does come to fruition with these talks later this week.
What about the stuff that's, I guess, what some call the grand deal between the two sides, Tyler, and that is things like state subsidies, tech competition, national security. I mean, you know, you bring up these issues on either side, and it's a really difficult conversation. Just got about 30, 40 seconds here. Is that stuff that's going to happen later in the week? Is that between, you know, Trump and Xi to talk? How does that come about?
It really feels like right now they are just trying to keep the tension simmered so that they can have those broader talks about what that bigger framework for a trade deal would look like down the road. I'd point you to the fact that we saw on Friday the USTR launched the Section 301 investigation into China's purchase obligations under the first Phase 1 trade deal. So there are a lot of structural issues that do have to be addressed here, as we know that the Trump administration has said that one of their top priorities is rebalancing trade, in their words, and that's going to take a lot more time to hammer out.
Good stuff. I hope you get some sleep. I hope you're allowed to. Bloomberg TV White House correspondent Tyler Kendall, where it is in the wee hours in the morning. She is in Tokyo.
I guess I'm asking, like, put the blinds down, right? Sleeping completely during the day, staying on U.S. time.
That's a little tough. We do it a little bit when we're in California, but it's not even close.
I'm not going to pretend to do anything that what Tyler's doing right now.
All right, let's stay on U.S.-China trade relations and to something that really caught our attention on our read-in this morning. It was from our Bloomberg economics team, and it pointed out that even if the two sides, U.S. and China, agreed to extend the current tariff truce, China still faces effective U.S. tariffs of around 40%, about 25 percentage points above the global average. So let's get to it. Jenny Welch is part of that Bloomberg economics team who put that out this morning. She's Bloomberg Economics Chief Geoeconomics Analyst, and she's out there in our D.C. bureau. Jenny, so you guys did put out this note. You also said the calm may not last. Prior deals, namely prior truces between the U.S. and China, reached, and then the Phase 1 deal that followed Trump's first trade war with China have proved short-lived. So how are you seeing it? What's the smart discussion we should be having right now about what we are hearing out of Asia?
So I think there might still be a spectrum of options here. On one end of the table, we may have them just agree to extend the current tariff truce, leaving, as you mentioned, those 40% effective tariffs on China in place, going as far as they might agree to a full deal. They've sketched out here a framework for a deal, which suggests that there are a lot of details still to be worked out. But I think even if we're at that further end of the spectrum where they agree to something comprehensive, all the details are fleshed out, there is still the risk that tensions won't go away, that the structural divides we have between the U.S. and China aren't going to be papered over by this deal. And indeed, that's what we saw with the Phase 1 deal inked in Trump's first term. It took over 2 years of a trade war to get to that deal, and the deal itself only lasted maybe weeks, maybe months before tension started to erupt again.
I'm so appreciative of you and the entire team there in D.C. and all over the world that can keep track of all of this for us. It's confusing to me as somebody who follows this as part of his job, but I can't imagine trying to be somebody who runs some sort of business or makes decisions based on trying to understand, okay, what are the tariffs going to be in the future with a country where so much of what we consume here in the U.S. is made. What is a baseline level of tariff that companies should think about when they bring their goods from China?
That's really unclear at this point. China's sitting at 40%. If the U.S. is serious about maintaining this effort, as was the initial argument under the beginning days of this Trump administration, that we're seeking to lower our dependence on China's and reduce our exposure there, then you can't take tariff rates much lower than that, because many of the competitor economies in Southeast Asia that we are notionally seeking to shift supply chains to, they're hovering at about 20% themselves. So there's not a lot of wiggle room there. At the same time, the leaders in the lead up to this meeting this week have suggested that there's been advancement in discussing cooperation on fentanyl, which is the basis for a huge chunk of U.S. tariffs on China, and might be hinting at the idea that the U.S. is seeking to or is open to the possibility of bringing those tariff rates down. So there's a roller coaster potentially underway on tariffs, and then that's not even getting into things like export controls. So there's also a lot of uncertainty about where they might land.
I mean, what is the U.S.-China relationship in your view? I mean, they don't get along on a lot of fronts. They haven't gotten along on a lot of fronts for a long time. You know, they both want tech and AI domination. They both would like, I mean, the U.S. has it at this point, currency domination, but China would love it. Political ally dominance. Like, there's just so much going on right now between these two. I mean, I feel like it's the ultimate frenemy relationship. Is that fair, and is that just the way it's going to be, and that's what we should expect between two superpowers?
I think when you take a step back and you look at not just this Trump administration's policy towards China, but the last few U.S. administrations' policy on China, there has been a consistent through line of, you can call it strategic competition, you can call it rivalry, but along the lines of there are these structural tensions in the way in which these two countries operate in the world and their interests, and that is likely to persist regardless of who is in power and regardless of what deals can be signed, because they're not going to be able to paper over those fundamental differences and fundamental divergence of interests.
What is the biggest sticking point? If you were to look at the list of issues between these two countries, which is one that these two countries are going to have the hardest time overcoming?
Oh, the list is kind of endless, but when you think about it just in terms of the trade realm, right, President Trump has accused China of engaging in practices that are unfair and that have hurt Americans, American jobs, and the American economy. The kinds of steps that he would want, and Secretary Bessent has referenced China taking to engage in whole-scale reforms of how its economy operates to address those practices, are things that Beijing is not interested in contemplating. So even on that one particular issue of just trade and economic ties, there's a fundamental difference in what these two sides want, and therefore what they're likely to achieve out of any trade deal. But certainly one that appears to be what this one is, focused more on things like purchase commitments and kind of shorter term temporary fixes to a trade imbalance.
So come Thursday, when these two leaders meet, talk, hold a press conference, one would assume, what are you watching out for? And just got about 30, 40 seconds here.
I think the main thing is whether or not they're announcing an actual deal where they have fleshed out all the details, or just a framework for a deal for their teams to work out later, which is what we've seen with, for example, Europe, Japan, and South Korea. If we're in that latter camp, I think that means there's much more uncertainty, because we've seen those frameworks don't always necessarily translate into a fully baked deal or agreement, and we could still see tariffs and tensions rise later on.
All right, great stuff as always. Jenny, thank you so much. Bloomberg Economics Chief Geoeconomics Analyst Jenny Welch out there in our D.C. bureau. Hey, coming up, something that we're going to talk about so relevant, Tim, I think it's safe to say, to our current times.
Yeah, the 7 rules of trust. We're going to be speaking with the founder of the household name online reference site that is built on trust, Jimmy Wales. He's the founder of Wikipedia. He's joining us just after this.
That's coming up. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek Daily on a day where we are seeing stocks rally really across the board. So we are up about 1% on the S&P 500, a gain of 1.6% on the NASDAQ 100. More to come on the other side of the break. This is Bloomberg.
It's 2:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. U.S. stocks trading at records. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all in the green. S&P right now up 71. That is an advance of just about 1%. 10-year 3.99%. And gold is at 4,002, down now by about 2.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much for that. Well, we want to get right into this next guest, because trust is something that comes up a lot, whether it's news media, whether it's social media, whether it's politics, whether it's business leaders. And our next guest knows a lot about trust. In fact, his business is based on it. Jimmy Wales is founder of Wikipedia. He has a new book out, The 7 Rules of Trust, a blueprint for building things that last. That book out tomorrow. And lucky for us, he joins us right here in studio. Welcome, welcome. Nice to have you here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's like a spaceship in here. It's amazing.
Some call it the fishbowl. We call it home. This book about trust, when did you start writing it?
It was a couple years ago. I had some ideas around this, and yeah, just started, and it's obviously turned out to be quite timely, as we have a lot of issues around trust in society, and I want to encourage people to let's get back to a society of trust.
You know, it's funny. Carol and I spent a lot of time talking about this ahead of the interview because Wikipedia sort of seems, and look, it's had its challenges, no question, it's had its controversies, but for things that are online, it's kind of this weird utopia in the sense that...
It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. I mean, we know anonymous people online oftentimes are full of vitriol and hate. We can see that even when people use their names on social media platforms. We lock our doors when we leave the house. Why does trust work on Wikipedia, but kind of seems like nowhere else right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, you know, one of the 7 rules of trust that is most meaningful in that regard is purpose. Like Wikipedia has a very simple purpose, which is to build an encyclopedia, and we make all our decisions around that. And the rules about participation and so forth. And that's very different from social media, where there isn't a clear purpose other than free speech and openness. And therefore, that toxicity really creeps in quite a lot in social media. You know, people say outrageous things because they get rewarded for it. They get more followers, they get more engagement, and the algorithms love that.
We talk about clickbait all the time.
Clickbait all the time. And, you know, that's very different from the world of Wikipedia where, I mean, thank goodness our headlines are so boring. There's no clickbait, you know, it's like the article on Thomas Jefferson's called Thomas Jefferson, you know, but it does what it says on the tin, you know. That's a very British expression, I'm afraid. But yeah, I mean, I do think that having a simple purpose is a part of what keeps us focused and keeps our community focused.
How do you describe facts? Or how do you determine facts? And I am amazed I've been doing this a few years, and I felt like when I started, it was very clear. Fact versus fiction in terms of reporting and doing stories. And I feel like there's a lot of gray area, and I just feel like a fact is a fact. So how do you guys determine what's a fact in an entry? Yeah,
I mean, we're really old fashioned. Like what we look for are reliable sources. So we want, you know, sort of academic research or quality newspapers, quality magazines, quality books, really old fashioned. And, you know, the idea that we should treat, you know, the New England Journal of Medicine as the same as social media influence online is obviously just wrong. Like you really want facts, and that's what people want from Wikipedia. They don't want
sources matter.
Chaos. Sources really matter. Like having a good quality source is what it's all about.
But why don't sources matter to everybody? And other people will say, okay, I believe this source is reliable. So, like, you know what I mean? Like, we are living in, like, different worlds.
I think that's a huge problem. I mean, I do think, you know, it's really important. I mean, one of the problems that we've seen is that a lot of the media, in response to the changing and very difficult financial model for journalism, they've chased after really partisan audiences. And so, you know, sometimes you read something and you're like, yeah, that was interesting. That was good, but I'm not sure I got both sides of the story there. I live in the UK, and we have just an example, 2 quality newspapers, The Guardian and The Telegraph, left-leaning, right-leaning. They're both great newspapers, but I often read one and I'm like, oh, and then I go read the other and I'm like, yeah, you probably should have been somewhere in the middle, both of you. And it would have been, I think, a better story had you said, well, you know, we got one side of the story, but we actually had to go out and find somebody to tell us a little bit about the other side. You know, you can't be too like, the moon is made of rocks or is it cheese? Who knows? I don't mean that.
Hopefully
but I mean,
cheese.
seriously, hopefully cheese. But but you know, like seriously thinking about like who are we talking to, and are we getting to the bottom of this?
With media, with trust in media here in the United States declining and having declined over the last few years, in your view, is there something that we can do better, that the media can do better, that it can borrow from what has worked at Wikipedia, what has worked with the methods of trust that you've studied, that can make us build trust again with our audiences? Yeah,
I mean, well, the good news is that the financial press, like Bloomberg, is still among the most trusted. And I think that's because by the mandate of what you're trying to do, informing business people and investors, you kind of have to be like ruthlessly objective. You're not chasing after partisan audiences and things like that. But I do think that's a big thing. Big data. Data is important. Transparency. I think, you know, realistically, you know, one of the things that Wikipedia does that's kind of odd is we'll have a, at the top of a page, the neutrality of this article has been disputed. And I always,
we've all seen it.
Yeah, we've all seen it. And I always say, I kind of wish sometimes the New York Times would put a banner up just saying, we had a big fight in the newsroom. We weren't quite sure.
So like more
we
how
decided
the sausage
to roll
is made
this,
type
but
of thing.
but here's a little bit of their inside thinking. Like, we did want to report this. We're not sure we've got the full story yet, because that pretending to be perfection all the time, people see through that, and they know, of course, and I think they're willing to say, yeah, like, actually journalism is quite hard, so a little more transparency is always good.
I just want to mention a headline crossing the Bloomberg. Amazon plans to cut up to 30,000 corporate jobs. This is coming from Reuters. The stock right now down about 1.5%. Keep in mind, this company does report earnings this week. It is up about 1.5%. So it doesn't look like we're seeing too much stock reaction, at least initially, but those are some big job cuts.
One thing I will note, it follows Target's corporate job cuts as well. Amazon, according to the terminal, has 1.5 million employees. A lot of those, of course, are warehouse employees. Not a good portion of those are corporate employees. So worth looking at the numbers here.
It's interesting. We're in an era where maybe people are looking like we need the worker bees, but maybe we don't need management so much. Hey, we're talking with Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia. His new book, The 7 Rules of Trust, a blueprint for building things that last. Do you get pressure a lot from companies, politicians, individuals to like change an entry?
No, not really. I mean, people, I meet a lot of people, and people often are like, well, my Wikipedia entry, what about this? What about that? And I'm just like, oh, yeah, send us an email. Like, we'll have somebody look at that. That's all fine. In general, no. And actually, we're very...
But you're really just saying, just send them an email and I'm not going to do anything about it.
Kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, sometimes people have a legitimate point. They're like, oh, well, I did this thing and it was in the press, and, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe we just overlooked it, and that's great. But, at a deeper level, one of the things that's really important is, we aren't funded by governments. We aren't funded by sort of major donors. We're funded by people giving their $20. And that makes a big difference for our intellectual independence. We're not worried like, oh, if we've got something negative about whatever, then we might lose our donation.
How is the fundraising going? Because I feel like I've gotten a lot of messages from you throughout the years. Please, from Jimmy Wales on Wikipedia. We've all seen it.
Yeah, we've all seen it.
Is it going okay? Is funding going okay?
It's okay. Yeah, we've been, we're stable. We're very cautious with money, so we always try to build our reserves and so on. And then, recently, I don't know, Elon tweeted, defund Wikipedia. I think we made about $5 million that day. So,
so you can text Elon. I know you guys have been in touch. You can text him and say, tweet about us again when it gets to the end of the year.
Have a laugh.
Well, you have had some
conversations to raise money.
You have had some conversations with Elon over the years. We're going to take a break, but come back and maybe you could fill us in a little bit on that and continue the conversation. We are talking with Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia. As we said, book, very timely, The 7 Rules of Trust, a blueprint for building things that last. And it is certainly a topic for discussion that we talk about a lot when it comes to politics, when it comes to business, when it comes to financial markets.
Hey, just worth repeating this Amazon news. Shares of Amazon, they're now lower, but still higher, but they've given off some of their gains. Up by about 1% right now. The redhead crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Reuters reporting that Amazon plans to cut up to 30,000 corporate jobs. Those jobs represent nearly 10% of corporate workers. Those jobs cuts are set to start on Tuesday. That, again, according to Reuters.
All right, we're going to continue with Jimmy Wales in just a moment. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek Daily.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, we're continuing with Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia. He's got a new book out. It's out tomorrow, The 7 Rules of Trust, a blueprint for building things that last. Elon Musk, you've had an ongoing relationship or text relationship with him.
I've known him for years, actually, now. I'm getting old.
Aren't we all? I like to think like a fine wine, just getting better. Yeah. But he has talked about defunding Wikipedia, and you said, that has brought in a lot of money, so thank you, Elon. What are the conversations that you've had with him back and forth?
He believes Wikipedia has become Wokepedia, which is not true. I encourage him to sort of, a better message is to say, if you feel like Wikipedia's got some bias, encourage people to come and participate. People who agree with you. Don't paint us as like, oh, they're crazy left-wing activists or something. We aren't. And by the way, he's also encouraging crazy left-wing activists to come and bother us, and that's not good either. So, realistically, I can't predict what Elon's going to say or do. He's Elon, he does what he likes.
But what's he like one-on-one? We're to be fully transparent. We listened to a podcast, and I think you brought up something about like Elon one-on-one versus Elon,
he's always been
performer.
Yeah, he's always been very nice to me in private, and civil and so forth. And I've met him in person a few times, and and then he's got a huge public persona, a huge public character. And sometimes I slightly ignore that because I'm like, oh, he's just being Elon in public. If I ran into him, I think we would have a very friendly chat.
Over the last 20 plus years, Wikipedia has kind of lived on despite massive changes with technology. We're undergoing one right now with AI and the way that people are using LLMs. You have said that you are building Wikipedia to last 100 more years. How do you ensure that you do that when you don't even know what technology will be around?
Well, it's true. We have no idea. So I think all we can do is preserve our intellectual independence, keep an eye on the finances to make sure we're not vulnerable, be open and keep our community's mind open and active to say, oh, how do we adapt to new technology? Is there things here we could use? What can we do to preserve our mission, which is free knowledge for everyone?
Well, come back soon. We know you're across the pond, as we like to say, but you're welcome anytime.
Lovely. Thank you.
Good luck with the book. Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia, new book, The 7 Rules of Trust, a blueprint for building things that last. That book, it is coming out tomorrow.
I'm Tim Stenovec along with Carol Massar. Let's take a look at some stocks on the move today. With us is Bloomberg News equities reporter Alexandra Semenova. Alex, what is on your radar?
Hey guys, well, it is all about Qualcomm today. The company is trying to break into the market for AI accelerators, which are used to create and run artificial intelligence models. This is the very segment that transformed the semiconductor industry and made NVIDIA a household name. So Qualcomm here is trying to challenge NVIDIA. Shares at some point today rose as much as 22%. The stock is up about 13% right now. The company's new AI 200 lineup will start shipping next year. It already has a customer, Saudi Arabia's AI startup Humane, and certainly an enthusiastic reaction today from investors. But Bloomberg intelligence analysts say that it is too soon to call this a serious challenge to NVIDIA. Obviously, it's a behemoth, very hard to compete with.
Yeah, I mean, it was up more than 20% and now just about a 12% gain. So the excitement still kind of there. Waning. But yeah, exactly. Let's go to Lululemon. What's going on?
Yeah, very upbeat news for them today, given the tough year that they've had. They entered an agreement with the National Football League as well as sports merchandiser Fanatics to develop a lineup of fan apparel. This comes as the retailer searches for new ways of growth. The line includes clothes for all 32 NFL teams and will be sold through the NFL and Fanatics shops. The merchandise will include things like hoodies and other core products across Lululemon's key lines. The company's shares are up, it looks like about 2% right now. It was down, though, 53% this year through Friday's close.
Is this going after women? Because I know that they've talked about women buying a lot of jerseys and so on and so forth.
This particular lineup, it doesn't seem like it.
It's not going to be like yoga pants with
maybe
stuff.
We'll have to see.
I'm trying to understand what the
that
gear
would be
is.
a lot of fun if they know what's good for them.
Yeah, maybe the folks over at Lulu are listening, Carol, and come up with some new ideas thanks to Carol Massar.
Custom products for Carol.
No, the sarcasm. Thanks very much, buddy. This next name, I was kind of surprised, but it is like a top gainer in the major indices today.
It is. There is nothing like some private financing to come to the rescue. Keurig Dr. Pepper is raising $7 billion from Apollo and KKR to help fund its acquisition of JDE Peet's. That's the maker of Peet's Coffee and some other brands. This is meant to ease some of the investor concerns that they had around the company taking on too much debt. Wall Street had expressed a lot of disappointment over Keurig's August announcement to buy the Dutch coffee company for about $18 billion. So this is alleviating some of those concerns. The stock had increased as much as 10%. Again, pairing some of that gain about 7% right now, and it's had a really rough run up until today.
Yeah, kind of interesting to see, though, what's going on. All right, good stuff. As always, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Our Alex Semenova joining us with Stocks on the Move. Check it out for more conversations like this. 5-minute episodes of the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcast. Hey, folks, we've got a rally underway. We've got stocks higher across the board.
We do. I want to talk about Amazon, though, up 1.1%. The company planning to cut as many as 30,000 corporate jobs beginning Tuesday. Reuters report citing 3 unidentified people familiar with the matter. That reduction would represent nearly 10% of the company's roughly 350,000 corporate employees.
More when we continue. The close is next on TV.